but this is sort of a small project type of thing where we take existing applications. There's this real world example app, which basically it's a sort of API specification where there are different projects for running the front end and different projects running the back end. You could technically connect any of the two of these, but I chose that we probably should use the React and Redux for the front end and Django for the back end. You can, as far as I care, use any of these if you want to, but I will be using the React version on the front end and Django on the back end. And we're not actually coding anything, we're just sort of cloning the projects and then using Docker to run them. And this is a good example on what it would be like to maybe containerize some of our projects if you've never done that before. Let's begin by actually creating a new folder, because then we need to clone the projects. And also this is probably good to have so it's usable outside of Anders as well. So let's clone the Django. I have now cloned the backend, and now I clone the front end as well. So now we have both the backend and the front end in our folder here, and we need to create a Docker Compose file that can be used to launch the entire project, which includes the front end and the back end, and ideally as well the database. So let's just create a Docker Compose YML. Why does it create them here? And I'm going to sort of cheat a bit and copy paste an existing one because I'm lazy. And this is the back end, this is the front end. And the MySQL can stay as it is, although I think we need to give it some more variables. So let's see. So we at least want to define the database, what it's going to be called when it's created. So let's say I think the app is called Conduit, so let's call it that. Same with the password actually. And we don't actually want to use the root, we want to use a user. Okay, so that should be it for the database. So then we just need to look into what's here. README probably would be a good start. So installation, just clone, install requirements from what it seems like, and okay, yeah, so nothing really that big. We just need to install the requirements. But I already know that this probably is using SQLite. Yes. So we want to use the Django environ package for configuring the database URL. So what happens to be the last release? 045. So we can start by adding that to the requirements. And then we can modify the settings to actually use environment variables for the database instead of being hard-coded. So let's just copy paste. And might as well use the debug here. And replace the entire database part with the... Okay, so... Okay, but you know what to do.
I know what to do.
You install the environment package. Yeah, you don't actually need to do this if you want to hard code the settings. You can do that, but I want to use the environment variable. So what is important is that we can change the database setting here to point to our own container, which runs the MySQL. So as long as everybody can do that somehow, that's fine. And it actually even works without doing that, but that's bad practice to run SQLite. So there's some pointers sort of. So right now we're doing this one because this is something you will need to do to a lot of our projects. They don't have environment variables that can be used to configure the settings. So now we hopefully have this configured right. We haven't yet tried. And we cannot try before we create a new Docker file. So let's do that then. So I will create a file called backend.docker file. And in here we can copy paste the Python. And now we can actually add the entire directory. And our entry point should be python manage.py run server. Let's say 8,000. Yeah. And actually we need to also install, we need to install the requirements. And we also need to install this thing. So we actually this is for Postgres. I don't know what's it called for MySQL. Well, we'll find out from the error message eventually. Yeah, that should kind of be it for the backend Docker file, and we can try building it. So here instead of image we do build, and then I have to look up the reference. We need to specify the file name now. So okay, so we give it the context and we give it a Docker file name. So context is this directory and the Docker file is called the backend.docker file. Now if let's just comment this one out for now. Now if we do docker compose up, it should fail, I think. Not here yet, but when it tries to launch, it probably dies because it's missing the MySQL thing. No such file. We do need to specify the root password. And what else failed? No such file. Oh. Wait, what? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's trying to run sort of the, because I had the whole string here. It's trying to run that as a single parameter, so we need to split it up into this. And now that should work. It's true, it should still fail, however. Yeah, we can see it exceeded already because no, it still gets the same error. So does it actually?
Because you're not running it in the Django real example folder, you're running it.
No, our work directory is that, and it copies it. We can run, if you want to see, I can run like let's run ls and check that we have the manage.py in the same folder. Yep, we have the manage.py. So I'm guessing what happens here is just sort of fucking up how to launch the command, so I'm just doing manage.py and see what happens. Yep, that works. So now we can use the entry point. Get rid of the command entirely. Yeah, and now it tells us that we forgot to set the database URL, which is correct. I did forget that, so let's add that. And I forgot the syntax, so I'm copy pasting again. Yes, so it's MySQL, and this is a good example. Copy paste, and our user is conduit. Also conduit, and our server is MySQL. Okay, so this should now be correct, but it should still fail. And that is because we still do not have the dependencies for the MySQL. Or maybe, yeah, we might want to add the debug as well. That needs to be in quotes. Okay, so let's see if we have it running actually. Okay, it's running, so maybe it does work. Let's see. Oh, I haven't opened the ports either, of course. Once I'm done with this, I'll sort of help around for people who are still behind. Localhost 8000. Okay, so we clearly have some problem with the Django container then. I think. So Docker. Let's just jump inside the container and see what's happening. Oh yeah, we don't need to use this with. I'm in the wrong directory. Okay, so if we here try to run, for some reason it's not giving us output. We don't care. Yeah, so it's missing this one, and I think let's Google. No. No, it's actually still running regardless. Yeah, this was the old one, so this is. I never remember how these went. No? MySQL Python didn't work because. Okay, this might be because we're using the Alpine image. Yes, so you can hit issues like this when you're using the Alpine image. It might be missing some stuff. Like here, we're missing. Let's Google. Yeah, so I think that's. Yeah, so the MySQL Python was the Python 2 version, and Python 3 it's called MySQL Client. But why did that fail again? MySQL config not found, so how about oh yeah, it was APK. Was it add then? Okay. So what I'm going to do instead is just remove the Alpine and rebuild and deal with it that way. So stop. Then we can add the requirement installation to the backend already. And let's try rebuilding. Okay. It's building. Unable. Okay. Still more issues. Oh, does it have a dash? Okay, maybe it has a dash then. So what now? Oh, yeah, I need to still pass the Y flag. So maybe that worked now. Let us see. Okay, yes, Django is up. And we can access the API, and now it fails because we haven't run migration, so let's do that next. So again, we can use the docker exec backend Python manage py migrate. And we have migrations running. So the command, I'm just putting it out there if somebody wants to see it. You don't need to use this part again unless you're Windows. Okay, so our backend seems to be working. Now for the front end. Let's see what kind of a README we have here. Okay. npm install, and to start, use the start. And we have the port 4100. Okay, so let's just prepare the building as well while we're at it. Ports. $4,100, and yeah, that should be it. I don't know really what would be the best way to add the environment variable. I know this one doesn't use Webpack, so usually when you run or want to include environment variables, that's handled by Webpack, but this doesn't use it. So this sort of what's in the source is hard-coded quite much. You cannot use the environment variable because it runs on the client browser. So we will sort of just have to hard-code it here. And now what's left is creating the Docker file. For that we can use Node 8 Alpine. I think that's an image, I'm not sure, but I hope it is. Let's use the code directory again. Copy the project in there, and then we need to simply run npm install, and then here should be npm start. Okay. Yeah, let's see how that works out. Yes, the image name was correct. A lot of the packages have the Alpine version, so you kinda can just guess it exists. npm warnings as usual.
What did you hard code that?
So in the README it said somewhere, yeah, if you want to change the API URL, you edit the source/agent.js. There's the API root variable, so you need to change it to point to our backend. So in our actually, no, it's not this. It's supposed to be localhost and 8000. Yeah, because it runs in the browser, not in a container. So it needs to be an URL we can access with our browser. So this one here.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, it compiled successfully and built successfully, but now I need to still rebuild it because I changed things. Okay, so let's see. Our API is working, and maybe our front end is so. Oh, it kind of is, but we get an error, so let's see what happens. Oh yes, right, we need the cross-origin policy things because we're running in a different URL, so let's see. Django settings. No, this isn't settings. I believe this already had installed the Django course middleware, which will let us set the whitelist on where can this site be accessed from using the API request. So there actually seems to be configured already some, but we're running in the 4100 port, so we need to change that. And now this should work. Usually you should mount the files inside the proper places in the containers instead of rebuilding every change, but I'm kind of hoping this will work now, so I'm not doing that. But for development, when you make code changes, you obviously want to see them before rebuilding the application. Okay, so maybe it works now. No. Or does it? Okay, it's not found error, so okay, we have one extra slash in our API URL, so should not add it to the end. And now we get to wait a bit again for rebuilding. Actually, here we can see in action the caching as well. It's using the cached images or layers on the other containers because we're not actually haven't made any changes there. The way it does that is every copy command sort of stores the state of the files that they were when the copy command was run, and if it doesn't match that, so let's say you have added a file, removed a file, or modified a file after that, I believe it checks the time modified on the files, then it will actually rebuild from this position if I were to modify any files inside the folder. So that's why it only rebuilt the front end now that I made a change here, even though I told it to rebuild everything, because it already deducted that it had the latest versions. Okay, this seems to be working now. No errors on console either, so let's try signing up. Okay, we get an error, but I think this isn't actually yes, so let's see. Get the error because we didn't get the error on the front page, so this would seem like an application error, not a configuration error, so not really what we want to fix, because we request and we get the response with it doesn't exist. So yeah, this is an application error, not a configuration error. And I think we can still post stuff here. Okay, wrong button. And we have an article, and so I think there was some bug on the personal feeds, but the global feed works. And if I how do I sign out actually? Okay, it's in settings, makes sense. So here we can also see the article, and sort of, yeah, that's it sort of for this exercise. So we took two random applications and deployed them with Docker. And this is sort of how a lot of our projects could work, because usually you don't or might not know how the projects work that much, but you can kind of guess what they should do and just create a container image around them and use Docker Compose for running them. And I believe the settings modification of adding the environment is one thing many projects will need to do, and maybe, well, I'd assume repositories that have a separate frontend already have the course headers package configured properly, so maybe that doesn't need to be done.